Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining in this morning for our technical drop-in session. It's been the third in the series, and I'm really happy that we're seeing a very good response from these sessions. And I'm certainly hopeful that the sessions and the information that we are sharing here and the platform that we are offering for a open technical discussion is something that is giving you some value as we work remotely from home as well. So feel free to reach out to us with your feedback and comments as we will share the email address or distribution list where you could reach out for questions or feedback. So thank you again for joining in. So today, what we are going to do is we'll continue in the same manner as we've done in the last two sessions. Uh, we will talk through, Phil, if you could just go to the next slide. Um, we will talk through a topic of interest today. We will spend 5-10 minutes on the topic, and then we will open up the forum for question and answers. As every week, I am going to record this session, and we will also share the slideware with all the attendees who've registered. So, feel free to ask your questions in the chat window, or you could send us the question over the email link, or just give us your question when you register. So this is how it will work. I'm now going to start recording this session. Yep, it's already now in the recording mode. So as we go through, Phil, if you just go to the next slide again. So the panelists today that we have are Philip Pereira. Now, Philip is our distinguished engineer in ANZ. Philip has an expertise in the backup and data protection for several years. So Phil is going to help us talk through ransomware, which is the topic for today, and how we can build our defenses against ransomware. We also have Stephen Callis and Steve Liu, both assisting him, and they will act as our panelists for this session. So for every week, feel free to type in your questions in the chat window, and then have a few questions in from the registrations. So we will make sure that we talk through those questions, and then if there are any questions on the line, we would be happy to moderate them as well. So with that said, I'm now going to hand it over to Phil. And Phil, over to you.
Thank you, Amit. So I hope everyone, I'm coming in loud and clear. And as you join in, if you could help us by putting your line in mute, it would be greatly appreciated. And when it comes to the time for us to Q&A, we'll give the opportunity to open the question and ask questions, and then also use the chat window and go on with that. So what I'm going to spend some time today is give a brief intro of our view of solving a pretty difficult problem that a lot of our customers are facing today. So that is to do with ransomware. Now, ransomware and defenses against that. Now, I think these threats started a couple of years back when they were going after individuals, locking up personal laptops and home computers and photos, and demanding payments to unlock them. Now it's gone from that commercial grade to industrial scale today. We hear in news quite often big industries being taken for ransom in Australia and right around the world today. I mean, even in the midst of the crisis pandemic situation we are in, they are not letting up. The attacks are increasing even more. So with that in mind, now I've had this discussion about, what would be a good defense strategy and what are the different ways and means of putting some defenses in. And I've frequently had discussions around this topic, around the range of options that our customers could use. So if I could summarize.
All of the team details you dial in. So if
Go for it.
So, yeah. So if I could summarize the discussion points, right? I mean, within Veritas, our portfolio is pretty broad. We cover data protection, we cover high availability, we cover disaster recovery. So we discuss over a range of topics, including site resiliency, what to do with storage failures, what to do with data corruption on the host, data corruption on consolidated storage, malicious users, what could they do, how can you defend against that? And you can see here a summary of the topics that we often discuss. And we discuss customers' mitigation measures, right? So on the columns here, and on the rows, you see the topics, and on the columns, you see the range of mitigation measures customers typically put in place, right? So at least, most customers are in the column of local backups, right? So most customers at least have some sort of backup. Now, I'm talking about a backup that is based on a backup product. And now, while you might say that a lot of customers do it, we still have customers who still simply rely on disk-based protection alone. You can see that disk-based protection alone, the mitigation measures are not scoring very well. Disk replication helps in some regard, and integrated disk protection is by way of combining disk replication and some sort of snapshots that you can fall back onto. Local backups is a topic where customers typically use a backup product that will read the data, write it to a media, and store it away. And remote backups is where data is protected, and data from not only data centers, data from all locations are protected pretty well. And going through different options and mitigation measures, the one option that scores pretty well is the ultimate air gap copy. So this topic of air gapping, putting backups in a way that is electronically not reachable, not touchable, has come to be the ultimate protection mechanism to provide immutability. So if I broadly put these mitigation measures into perspective, I'm not saying that you should apply a one-size-fits-all protection strategy. You don't need to go to air gapping everything, because the ultimate protection mechanisms and defense mechanism will cost. So the best strategy for you to go ahead is categorize your data and your applications by what's mission critical, what's business critical, and you might find some non-essential data in your environment. So the best strategy, and that is one that is most cost effective, is applying a combination of protection mechanisms that fits the different business applications that you have. So now, how could we help to do this pretty easily? And now this is a depiction of a data center layout that is pretty common for a lot of customers, right? So, I'm discussing here a customer who has a data center in one location, a data center in another. You cross-site data backup, backup data from one location, replicate it to another, and transfer the data to a third location. In this picture, I'm talking about using a feature in NetBackup called NetBackup Auto Image Replication. Right? With Auto Image Replication, you get to export the data to another NetBackup environment for recovery. So let's look at broadly the way forward to for ultimate resiliency. Right? So we say this is 3 stages for ransomware protection. So the best strategy is that you should look at a prevention strategy for data. You should look at a detection policy for bad stuff. And of course, finally, you should have a recovery strategy, right? So just having a recovery strategy alone is not ideal today. It's best to have a combination of these strategies to help you deal with it. So let me explain what these buckets mean. So prevention is about, now if you Google the topic ransomware, you'll hear a lot of people talking about a 3-to-1 strategy. What that is saying is that you should consider having, 3 copies of backups, 2 copies in 2 different locations, and at least 1 copy off-site, right? So that's given as a minimum protection and prevention mechanism you should employ for backups, right? So consider having data, again, I'll summarize, in data for recovery in 2 locations, and consider having 1 copy off-site so that you have a good prevention mechanism against a ransomware attack. And within our portfolio, within NetBackup itself, you could implement some of these strategies very easily. You could backup to tape, right? So backup to tape, well, tape may not be fashionable, but you could backup to tape and easily move the tape off-site and leave it totally electronically disconnected from networks, right? So you could encrypt what you write to tape and store it away. So even if the tape goes missing, it becomes very hard or impossible to read data from. But the most important thing is it gives you a very good air gap strategy for your recovery copy. You can also back up to immutable storage technologies like, for example, AWS offers in a cloud-based environment something called Glacier Vault Lock. Now, Glacier is a low-cost storage location, and Vault Lock gives you a worm capability for storing this data in an immutable manner, right? So prevention strategies, there is more than one available. Detection, I talked about detection. You should have a detection strategy. So now a backup product like NetBackup, you ask it to back up some data, it will back up data regardless of whether it's good stuff or bad stuff, right? It's the backup product. Its job is to perform backup. What Information Studio from Veritas can do is Information Studio can connect to a NetBackup environment, go through the metadata related to all the data sets it backs up, and detect ransomware. It can detect anomalies in your environment, right? It can detect some unusual things happening. And if you are using NetBackup today, you will at least have a NetBackup Op Center server running in your environment. Now, you could go back to your Op Center server today, right? Today, after this call, and implement some quick strategies, right? What are those? If there's a backup that deduplicates pretty well, it deduplicates to about 90-95% on a daily basis, and all of a sudden the deduplication rate drops to 50% or 30%, that's a clue that there's something going wrong with that particular server, right? So that could be a quick detection strategy. Another one could be that, your backups for the servers complete in about half an hour. And all of a sudden, one of the servers takes 3 hours to back up. That's a clue that something has gone wrong with that server. So you could create some quick win reports to capture anomalies in the daily backup behavior. And well, if you're not using backup or not using NetBackup, you could still use a product like Veritas Data Insight. Now, what Data Insight does is you could point it to your data sets in your data center. It will detect what's in files. It can also look at the contents of files, right? So it can classify files and very easily detect bad things lurking in your data center that you may not be aware of. So, sorry, I was talking to a slide that I don't think you saw before. Right. So this is where I was talking about, I'll recap again, the prevention strategies that I mentioned and the detection strategies I was talking about. So I summarize again, Information Studio to help you detect bad stuff from a backup environment. NetBackup Ops Center to detect anomalies with the backup patterns on a daily basis, and Data Insight to detect bad things from your data footprint. Even if a backup product is not used, Data Insight can help you detect bad things that way. So moving on, let's look at some recovery strategies, right? So recovery is not just about having a backup product. If you are using a backup product, explore the capabilities in the product that gives you fast recovery. Because if something bad were to happen, the last thing you want to do is spend time looking for, how can I recover? Or look, or your backup environment and the way backups are done doesn't help you recover things fast. Now, if you're using something like NetBackup today, NetBackup has built-in capabilities for rapid recovery, like instant recovery, for example. So these are features that NetBackup has had for about the past 10 years, right? So if you're using NetBackup today, if you have not explored using instant recovery, go have a look at it today. Instant recovery helps you recover very fast, rapidly, and get back to your, possibly ransomware affected data in a quick manner so that your business can go back to normal quickly. We also have a product called Veritas Resiliency Platform. Resiliency Platform allows the orchestration of a recovery workflow from a single console, right? So if you have to recover a collection of servers rapidly, you can go to Veritas Resiliency Platform and initiate multiple recovery actions to be driven on an application or a group of applications basis. Resiliency Platform can also help you recover an on-premises environment that you back up through like an AWS environment or through an orchestrated workflow as well, right? So for example, you can back up the data to an AWS cloud, keep it deduplicated there, and on the event you want to perform a disaster recovery rapid restore, Resiliency Platform can help you recover data quickly and get them started in an AWS EC2 instance so that you can, have a DR plan that wouldn't cost you so much. Copilot for Oracle is a feature that allows you to recover a large Oracle databases rapidly, another instant recovery mechanism. So recovery is not just about backing up, it's also about having a measure that helps you get the data back quickly. And because, what's the use of a backup if you can't recover data or if you can't recover data rapidly? So explore your product's advanced recovery capabilities because some of these features, they are just there in the product. They don't cost you anything more to implement. You just have to figure out the ways and means of using them. So with that, I'll come to a bit about what you can expect in the coming months. So immutability of backups is a hot topic these days. So you can expect very, very soon. Now, NetBackup is today in version 8.2. Version 8.3 will be released pretty soon, and that has more advanced immutability features, right? So we will start supporting better protection for catalog, better protection for data, even data stored on disk, right? So expect more focus from us to help you mitigate and overcome any ransomware challenges coming your way. So with that short intro, I will open the floor.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you for the the quick introduction, though it was, I would say it was comprehensive in terms of the life cycle of how you should look at ransomware. So I am now going to request everyone to type in their questions in the chat window and send it over to us. Meanwhile, I will start with the questions that we've received from the registrations, and yeah, we'll take it from there. So the first question I had, Phil, was around, does Veritas have a procedure to restore files that are already encrypted?
Well, okay. Let me, is it all right if I move back to a few slides?
Yeah, all good.
Yeah. Let me fast forward and rewind a bit.
Yep.
So, yeah, it's, you know, a backup product helps you with recovery. The detection and prevention, I discussed a few strategies, right? Now, the backup and recovery capabilities and these strategies alone don't help you fight these battles these days. So you should have a strategy to prevent the bad stuff coming in the first place, right? So, you know, you should still focus on a good security strategy that includes security software, that includes intrusion prevention as well. So, for example, intrusion prevention. Now, in our net backup appliances, now Veritas produces a series of backup appliances. These ship with an intrusion prevention and detection software embedded. So we recognize ourselves that a good recovery posture requires more than a backup software. Right? We, in fact, happen to be the only vendor who shipped an intrusion prevention and detection software embedded to a disk appliance. And we've been doing it from 2010 when we introduced our backup appliances. So having a good backup strategy alone is not good enough. You should have good security software, a firewall, detection capabilities as well. And don't forget the liveware, right? Liveware is you and me who use IT. It includes training for IT staff, not just IT staff. It includes training for all company staff as well. Now, at Veritas, we time to time we go through, you know, phishing attacks and other sorts of training. We even get our IT team sending us emails with links to check if the staff is clicking on things that could be a phishing attack, right? So strategies for prevention also includes the liveware aspect of it as well. So don't forget that there's not just technology, it's a people and, you know, individual responsibility issue as well. I hope that covers your question, Amit.
Yeah, and that's a very interesting fact that you mentioned that, you know, while we build all the protection strategies around our IT infrastructure, it is also a mindset that we need to be really cognizant about. The mindset of employees, the mindset of people who are equally responsible for letting something break in. So fabulous point, Phil, and thanks for you know, taking that context in the discussion. Now, maybe I'm going to flip a few questions in the order because there is one question that kind of follows in the same line of thought. And I think I can, you know, redirect this question to Steve Kellis, where the question says, where does the security software stop and from where does data protection kick in? And the second part of the question is, of course, is Veritas planning to partner with any SIEM vendors? Predominantly, SIEM would be security information and event management. So, Steve, Callis, did you want to take that question? Oh, by the way,
Sure.
this
Thanks,
question is a really good question to demarcate, the roles and responsibilities of the two segments. So over to you, Steve.
Sure. Thanks, Arvind. So I'll answer the second question first. So we work across our portfolio and in our data protection products with a number of security vendors. Normally, we don't go into details about who they are, though Phil did mention that in the on the actual appliances, probably historically from where Veritas came from in the semantic days, that there is embedded ransomware and hardened security on the appliances, not only in the form of software, but also in the form of the fact that we've done your classic sort of Unix, Solaris, Jazz type of hardening on the appliances, where we've turned off a lot of ports and a lot of features that you'd normally find on an operating system, and we've hidden that from the user and removed those vulnerabilities. To talk about the first question about where does your data protection software sit versus your security software, I think Phil showed the intro slide that we had before, which sort of the three areas, which are prevention, detection, and recoverability. So security software really is at the front of the gate, the front of the house there from prevention. Security software from various vendors are there to stop the attack happening in the first place. And really the backup software is there to help you recover. There are a few overlaps. So as Phil mentioned, you can use some techniques and some ways of going about things with backup software as part of prevention. So you can implement an air gap strategy where once you've taken your backup, you've made sure there's some physical separation so no one can corrupt that data once it takes place. Also, in regards to detection, there's not always one tool that's going to solve all problems. So at Veritas, we have our Insight portfolios where we, prior to taking the backup on the primary storage, we can go out there and do detection to look at anything strange is happening with the data on the primary storage even before we back it up, and we can send out alerts. Because the danger with ransomware is once it gets in, once it's in a high availability system where data is replicated, it's too late at that point. So that's really where you need to employ multiple tools and multiple techniques around prevention and detection. So that's where I see the separation from more security type of software versus data protection software like NetBackup or Backup Exec. I hope that answered the question for our customers, Arvind.
Yes, that's a very good that's a very good viewpoint where it's important to also identify the proactivity in the process as well as the overlap between security and data protection. So that's great. Thanks for that. All right. So the next question I had, and I will probably get Phil to answer that question for us, is Phil, you mentioned there is NetBackup Air, and then we also had a discussion around air gap networks. Can you just give us a quick distinction between the two, and how does that come to play? Are you there?
Sorry, I was on mute. So air gap happens to be a mitigation measure where you have total electronic isolation of your backups. All right. So let me go back to that slide to help explain. So yes, I talked about NetBackup Air and air gap. Now, air gap is about separating from your production environment to somewhere else. NetBackup Air is it happens to be a name we coined way back in what's it, year 20. I think year 2012 when we released NetBackup version 7.5. Amit, we released a feature called NetBackup Auto Image Replication. Auto Image Replication, in short, is also called AIR, right? Auto Image Replication. So that's the name we coined way back in 2012, long before all these air gap topics came about. But it so happens that NetBackup AIR also helps with air gap. Right. So if you look at this picture, you have the red domain where there is a customer's production data center, right? So you will have data center 1, data center 2. You have backups on data center 1 being done, and so copy 1. Right? So the 3-to-1 strategy: 1 copy of data on 1 location, a 2nd copy of data on another location, and then a 3rd copy of data in a totally 3rd location. And in this picture, I'm showing you that under the yellow bubble. So in the yellow bubbles, what you have is a 3rd location, and the separation of the red bubble and the yellow bubbles are done using something called NetBackup Auto Image Replication. So Auto Image Replication allows data and the catalog data associated with the backups to be exported to another environment, right? So this could give you a protection against malicious user intent as well, because you have this backup environment and the NetBackup AIR backup environment separated, and they could be different authentication domains, right? So just because someone has access to the production network doesn't mean that they have access to the NetBackup AIR location. Now, this is a very useful feature, and today we have customers who even export data to a hosted provider. So we have hosted providers who partner with Veritas today to offer a hosted backup environment for customers. So customer maintains a backup footprint, and the hosted partner operates a NetBackup AIR infrastructure that allows the backup copies to be replicated and stored off-site with them. So you have organizational separation, you have authentication separation as well. So in the event the production environments get compromised, now you have a hosted partner who can come in to help recover data because they have a separate electronic copy. So I hope that cleared the air of air gap and NetBackup AIR.
Yes. Thanks for clarifying the air. And just to add on to that, it might as well be a cloud target where people would want to, leverage air or let me just say NetBackup AIR to keep the copies safe, and then have that distinction between the 2 copies.
Exactly. Yes.
Brilliant. Thanks for that. Cool. All right. So the next question I had, and again, Phil, I might just get you to answer this one again, is does ransomware strategy change for structured data? Yeah, that's the question.
Okay. So to answer that, I'll flip to another slide. So yeah, I mean, we talked about using Information Studio, Data Insights. I mean, these products are really great at finding anomalies, right? Now historically, ransomware only went after Windows boxes, right? Windows machines that had structured data, encrypted hard disk. But now ransomware is becoming smarter. They are looking at data. They are looking at databases. They are looking at data that they could take and use for other purposes, just more than getting a ransom pay. Because structured databases have also data that is very useful for them to do, get a customer list, all right? Get a product list, get a price list, all sorts of reasons. So structured data is also under threat. So that is why having a mitigation measure that not only allows you to recover a normal data set fast, but having a mitigation measure that allows you to recover databases is also important. Copilot for Oracle is one of them. Right? So with Copilot for Oracle, it's a feature that allows you to protect large Oracle databases quickly. So you can perform your backups quickly. We allow Oracle database administrators to make use of things like incremental merge. It's an Oracle feature that was introduced in Oracle version 11. So it allows Oracle database administrators to perform almost like incremental forever database backups. They perform the initial golden copy, and then on subsequent days, they do an incremental update to the database. And with the incremental update, they're only backing up incremental data. But with Copilot, they get to perform a full recovery, even though it's an incremental backup. So not only does Copilot help you perform fast backup, it also helps you to perform things like instant recovery of Oracle database. So if you have a Copilot backup done with NetBackup, you can go to the NetBackup appliance that has the backup and perform an instant recovery where we effectively allow the database administrator to mount and open a database directly from the appliance, even without performing a restore. So in one of the tests we did, Amit, we found that we allowed a 10 terabyte database to be mounted and open for a DBA in 5 minutes. Now, so how good is that, right? So it's not just about, backing up data. You should pay careful attention to how fast you can get data back from. Now, we have a similar feature for SQL as well. We have something called a universal share that you can use for backups. So a universal share exposes a database share that exposes, think of it as a deduplicated file system that a SQL administrator can perform a database dump to. And with that dump being there, they can very quickly get back to performing a SQL recovery directly from a database dump and get back to business as soon as possible. So I know there's a lot of attention, Amit, for unstructured data, protecting files and pictures, things like that, but paying attention to critical information that is stored in databases is also becoming an important thing to focus on. So I hope I answered that question.
Yeah, exactly, Phil. And I think that the trend, as you rightly mentioned, there is a lot of discussion around getting this unstructured data covered. But yeah, that's where we also need to make sure that the databases and the core applications that actually generate the core revenue for any business, they need to have a very specific strategy as well. So thanks for that. Yeah, that covers the question. All right. So the next question I'm going to get Jeff to help us with, and Jeff is our leader. Jeff leads the Australia and New Zealand engineering and architecture team for Veritas. And Jeff, I'm going to get you to help us with this question. And the question is, what aspects of ransomware keeps leaders across IT landscape in Australia awake at night? It's probably a broader market specific question. Over to you, Jeff.
Thanks, Amit. I think I heard that question. There was a ping in the meantime. Let me just make sure I got that right. So what are we hearing from, can you repeat? Is that okay?
Yeah, so the question is, what aspects of ransomware keeps leaders across IT landscape in Australia awake at night?
Oh, fine. Okay. All right. Thanks very much for the clarification. So maybe I'll answer it this way. There's probably a few points on that one, right? So look, COVID-19's been interesting. We've had various organisations come to us concerned about being able to recover data in a very optimised or efficient manner. a number of ransomware variants, for example, have hit in the last few weeks. They're focused on hospitals. They're focused on hospitals more so in the US and Western Europe. But we've got Interpol as an example taking a lead role in warning organisations about it. So that's interesting given the current global dynamic. Symantec maybe is another. Have recently asserted that consumer attacks are declining. We're seeing attacks shift focus to corporates. Symantec will tell you that, off the top of my head, that the damage cost to corporates were about $11.5 billion in 2019 alone. We've seen Cognizant be left from a maze, a more recent ransomware attack, Cognizant in India, left with no reasonable or good or effective recovery options from this maze attack. And the reason is because ransomware attacks are getting cleverer, getting much, much smarter in that we're not only talking about data that's encrypted, we're also talking about the data that's actually being copied. So if organisations don't actually pay out the ransom attack, right, in some cases we're seeing data be published online. So the traditional approach here is that ransomware attacks rely on encrypting whatever they can get. But I think it can be argued, and certainly business leaders are talking more prominently about the fact that ransomware is getting smarter. It's not only encrypting stuff, it's copying stuff. It's not only indiscriminately encrypting data, it's using a myriad of tools and automation and techniques to try and identify the overall security posture of an environment. So it explores the target networks, it explores critical systems, and then it's able to make a more informed decision about what it wants to encrypt. But it's also able to look at disabling different types of security defenses. So to answer the specific question, ransomware is getting a lot of airtime, so it should, given the world we're currently living in and the threats that we're seeing and the persistence of large corporates being targeted. But fundamentally, organisations are saying, how do I better defend? You know, what tools can I use? How do I harden and better secure my environments? Maybe I have to accept the fact that advanced threats will breach my defences. I need to be better informed about how to recover. I need to automate the recovery as much as I can. And I need to have better and more efficient continuity and recovery strategies. So hopefully, Amit, I answered the question. Thanks very much, everyone.
Yes, you did, Jeff, and the point that you made is and really relevant is the speed at which these ransomware ransomware is evolving itself, right? And the recent ones that I've seen is the incubation period, right? So the ransomware does not come in and start affecting immediately. The incubation period is where it just replicates and reproduces itself. And then when it's within a scope of, multiple hosts, or the scope is wide enough, is when it starts kicking in. So by the time we realize, it's already made the impact. So, just having one strategy of protecting it may not be enough. And that's where we need to be on our toes at all times. So thanks, Jeff, for that. Brilliant context. Cool. So the next question we have is regarding Essential 8, and maybe I'll get Steve Liu to help us. Steve, the question is, in context of Essential 8, what is Essential 8, and what is the level of maturity, and can you relate it to the daily backups for us?
Yep, sure. Basically, Essential 8 it's based on the mitigation strategy published by the Australian government from Signal Directorate, ASD in Canberra, basically outlining type of strategies that for mitigate of the cybersecurity incident to help organization cyber attack, security incident caused by various cyber threat. So basically, they have a defined as a 3 level of a maturity level. So maturity 1 is basically based on the partial alignment with the intent of the mitigation strategy. Level 2 is a little bit higher in security, like most aligned, and you have a maturity level 3, which is the fully aligned, so it's a fully protected, that kind of level. So give you the context example is why is the reference to 8? So 8 mitigation strategies that include application control, patching applications, user application hardening. You have a patch operating systems, multi-factor authentication, daily backup, and some configure the Microsoft Office micro settings. So those are those 8 strategies to mitigate. So the one today I'm going to focus on is a daily backup. So from a daily backup perspective, you have a three different levels: level 1, level 2, level 3, as I mentioned earlier, for partial. With the level 1, basically you're looking at the backup is importing information, software and configuration settings are performed on a monthly basis. Your backup are stored for between 1 to 3 months, and the partial restoration or backup is tested on an annual or more frequent basis. So it doesn't give you that much protection, but give you a bit of a partial. You can restore the data on an annual or more frequently basis. That's the guideline to set up the maturity level 1. Then if we go into the maturity level 2, the backup is important information. So the difference here will be the backup are stored the offline or online, but is non-rewritable and non-erasable manner. And the backup are stored in between 1 to 3 months. Full restore and the backup is tested at least once. And the partial restoration or backup is tested on a biannual or more frequently basis. So level 2 is a little bit more stronger than the maturity level 1. And then further on, if you move into level 3, so the difference here is just a little bit more stringent. Like for example, your backup are still stored with a maximum. So here the guideline states that you need to store for at least 3 months or greater. So that's the difference with level 2. So you can only store between 1 to 3 months, and as opposed to same as level 1, 1 to 3 months. So it's a little bit more stricter. And on this basis, that most of the agencies are on level 3. For example, it's like the big organization like ATO, Environment Services Australia. So they all actually must comply to the ASD requirement, the mitigation strategies. So some other one is you have to backup stored offline. Again, I think Phil mentioned the 3-2-1 rules. You need to have 3 copies, 2 different locations, and one being offsite. So these rules apply to here. But then I've talked to other organizations, say we've got a strategy. So let's say we moving out from a tape. So tape is a perfect example of an air gap solution where actually you write a tape and the truck brings the tape to an offsite. So there's nothing in between. There's no even communication for hardware, like the network going through. But if what happens is they can relax this ruling. So if you're introducing object storage, what's going to happen is it's maybe a firewall, a one-way street to the data center, like using warm, write once or read many. So different strategy mitigating that to meet this kind of requirements. So just give you a rundown. This in summary. These are the 3 different type of maturity models, and for organization, and it's being published by the ASD, so the Signal Directorate. So if you got any questions, come back to me.
Brilliant. I think thanks, Steve, for that detailed overview. And yes, Essential 8 is, based on my conversations with multiple large organizations, Essential 8 has been, one of the key compliance guidelines that everybody's trying to drive towards. So thank you, and great question there. All right, so the next question I have, and I can see there is there are a couple of questions in the chat window where Phil has already answered. Before I come to that, I'll just take a couple of questions that we've received from the registrations, and I might just get Steve Callis to answer this one for us, Steve. It's a backup exec question. Can I upgrade from backup exec 16 to 21 without reinstalling it? So looks like it's a great question, Steve. If you just want to quickly run past, and we'll move on.
Yeah, I saw this coming in before we started. I had a quick look. It looks like that if you are running BE or backup exec 15, 16, or 20, you can upgrade to 21 or the latest version. But as always, if the person had any other information, any other more details about that question, they can email us some more specific details. But you can find all the information you need in the release note and the upgrade manual that's on the website. So the PDFs and the support material for backup exec is fairly detailed. So hopefully the answer should be in there. If not, just email us at the email address Ahmet will show, and we can go into more depth.
Brilliant. Thanks, Steve. Okay, let me come back to the question in the chat window. So the question is, does Veritas support the ability to run a script pre-post of running AIR? And Phil, I see that you've already answered this, but can you just detail it out for everyone on the call?
Yeah, so the question was, can you run a pre and post script as you execute a backup job? Yeah, net backup, you can always insert a pre and post script. You can even do it with backup exec as well. So the pre and post script doesn't have to be backup related. If you want an email sent to you as part of a script after a backup job is complete, you can arrange for that as well. They were there a long time ago to handle things like databases, to take a database offline or switch it into backup mode and perform a backup. Today, with database agents, you don't need to do that, but the script mechanism is still there. Now, net backup AIR is a post-backup activity. So, the net backup AIR auto image replication job is driven through a net backup workflow engine that is driven around storage lifecycle policies. So lifecycle policies, for one, you can control when lifecycle policy secondary copies get executed. So you can put a fence around, maybe you perform your backups maybe during the daytime, but you don't want replications to be done during daytime. So you have an option to control when the replication jobs happen for backups. So you can say, you can put a window around them, time window, right? So one mitigation measure is you can certainly control when the replication jobs happen, because I think the specific question that Chris had on the chat was, can you open and close a network port for even more better security? So that's a good angle to look at it, because I said, you can air gap it. You can keep a backup environment and a recovery environment, even hosted by a third party in a totally different network. But the network connection, you can connect and disconnect if you wanted to, if you are controlling maybe the replication window. So you could say, I replicate during this time of the day, and I close the window at that time of the day. So during other times, the network could be kept disconnected by your own automation tools. That's one method. The other method is, NetBackup has a rich REST API available today. So with that REST API, you could query NetBackup activity and then perform, write a script using REST API to talk to, anything else, like, detect an auto image replication job, execute a script, post to go and close a network port. That's another avenue. Yet another third avenue would be configuring alerts. So you could configure alerts related to NetBackup activity, and an alert or SNMP could also be driving a third action. So there are more than one ways of driving scripts or post-event activities, if I summarize them. So I hope that helped.
Yes, thanks, Phil. And absolutely, when it comes to the pre and post, there is no there is no limited answer there. It could just be from changing firewall configuration to alerting, and the flexibility that the net backup scheduler as well as the framework provides is to help. It helps everyone to just pick and choose the use case. So with that, and with 5 minutes on the card, I just had one more question, the last question that we had received, and it was regarding an Office 365 subscription. So given that we are fag end of this, I'm just going to request the the person that we've sent a response to your question, and if you have any more follow-ups for that question, we'd be happy to take it on the email address that we have here, and we may have time for the last question on chat. It doesn't look like so. I think we are at the end of the list of our questions. So thank you everyone for joining us. This is our email address where you could ask us any follow-up questions or share in your feedback from the session. If you have topics in mind that you would want to listen or hear about, we are happy to consider them. So feel free to send in your feedback as well as your topic requests on this email. For next week, what we are going to focus now is still sticking to the remote working situation and the remote working paradigm. We are now going to look at the data risk and privacy and the considerations in that space. So stay tuned for next week. We will share the registration link for next week. And stay safe, stay at home, and thank you for joining today. Have a good one. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.